Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope you're doing well. This is Coda, and the party has finally arrived. The Skaven are confirmed as the fourth and final playable faction for Total War Warhammer 2, at least upon launch day. The Skaven are a race of certifiably insane rat people on warp cocaine with guns. That alone pretty much seals the deal for me, but if you need some more convincing, this video has 13 reason points that might turn you into a follower of the Horned Rat yourself. There's actually a lot more to the Skaven than meets the eye. You just gotta dig a little deeper beneath the surface to find it. After taking in the vermin tidal wave of information this past week, I think that the Skaven are gonna be a really good thing for this game, or this series rather. But before we jump into it, I do have a little disclaimer. Oh yes, I hath learned. This video is not a Skaven army guide, overview, or strategy analysis, or anything like that. It's 13 pieces of information, whether that be stats, lore, mechanics, about the Skaven that I found interesting or fun enough to point out. So with that said, let's jump right into it. 13 reasons to use the Skaven in Total War Warhammer 2. Number 1. Magic damage. The Skaven can deal magical damage in spades, and not just from their casters or spells. They might even give the Azrai a run for their money by the time Clan Skryre joins the party. By my best count, 7 of the non-character units on the Skaven roster deal magic damage by default. 5 of those are straight up confirmed, those being the Plague Claw Catapult, the Warp Fire Thrower, the Poison Wind Globadiers, and even the Doom Wheel's missile damage, not its melee damage. The Plague Monk Sensor Bearers, however, deal it in melee combat. So that's 5, and as for the other 2, we can virtually guarantee that the Plague Furnace and the Warp Lightning Cannon will deal magic damage as well. CA may have actually confirmed that these units do in their livestream, I can't remember exactly, but either way, that's a lot of magic damage. And this is due to one thing and one thing only. Number 2. Warpstone. The ingenious technology and weapons of the Skaven are powered by the very same stuff they crave for their parties. Warpstone is the raw power of chaos manifested into a glowing green physical compound, which is why so many of their weapons and explosions are neon green. Creative Assembly did a really good job following the source material here, because every weapon classified as a Warpstone weapon on the tabletop dealt magic damage as well. So with all that being said and all this magic damage flying around, Total War Warhammer 2 will definitely not be a good game, if you're a Cairn Wraith. Number 3. Psychological warfare, or chemical warfare, the two go hand in hand really. It should be pretty clear that Skaven have shit tier leadership, but it's going to be less of a handicap for them because every army they fight will end up with shit tier leadership as well. Thanks to their copious amounts of diseases and contagions, the Skaven have the most units of any current faction in Total War Warhammer that deal the Discourage debuff, which, as a reminder, is a negative 16 leadership penalty to any unit hit for 10 seconds. That is pretty huge. Leadership is very important in this game. The Plague Claw Catapult, Warp Fire Thrower, and Plague Monk Sensor Bearers all deal discouraging damage. But the Plague Monks in particular are unique because they're the only unit that does so in melee combat, like in the whole game, except with one exception. There is one character in Game 1 that does this as well, the most legendary, most powerful, most white dwarf to ever live, Grombrindle. And truth be told, that's not where the similarities of these two races end, which leads me to number 4, the Dowie. The dwarves hold many grudges against many races, including their own, but there's no chapter in the Book of Grudges thicker than the one reserved for the Skaven. These two races have fought tooth and nail in the mountains and caverns of the Old World for countless ages, and they've learned a great deal from each other while doing so, although both would sooner die than admit it. The Skaven and the dwarves share more similarities than they appear to. Both prefer the subterranean depths for their strongholds, both lack the general leg-to-torso ratio required to ride a horse, and both are vastly superior to the other factions of the Warhammer world in technology, science, and innovation. Specifically, of course, in their ingenious war engines. And while I won't say one is further along in the arms race than the other, although, one essentially does have a nuke, I will say that they are the antithesis of one another. The maniacal obsessive innovation of the Skaven and the unending stubborn pride of the Dowie create a vicious cycle that knows no end. Gyrocopters, doom wheels, bombs, flamethrowers. I mean, I won't be shocked when the Steamjet Warp Bomber DLC comes out. But while the ingenuity of these two races are comparable, the Skaven also differ from the Dowie and many other factions in one very big way. Number 5. The Skaven are the first, quote, bad guys in Total War Warhammer with guns, artillery, and technology as a backbone of their military might. Now first, I know, there are no good guys or bad guys in Warhammer. Everyone is a dick. And that's true. But what I mean is, the Skaven are the first intrinsically evil faction with a veritable arsenal of advanced weaponry. Typically, the factions bent on death and destruction have crude to no artillery at best, preferring brutal monsters or devastating magic to support their hordes. And what's it called? Fuck me. For chaos. The Hell Cannon doesn't really count because it's a demon. And while the Skaven still do have both monsters and magic, their Doom Wheels, Warp Fire Throwers, Warp Lightning Cannons, and Poison Wind Globes will add firepower to the, quote, bad guys on a level that previously was only used by the Dwarves in Empire of Man. But the Skaven aren't staying on that level for long, because they haven't even reached their final form yet. This is just a taste of the devastating weaponry the Skaven possess, because number 6, Clan Skryre, haven't even fully arrived yet. While some people might be understandably disappointed by the focus on some Skaven clans and thus the general omission of others, there is little doubt that the others are still coming. At least Clan Skryre, who are the ultimate evil geniuses in a race of evil geniuses. They are the chief innovators when it comes to Skaven tech, especially a character known as Ikit Claw, who is curiously left out from the roster but may still show his face yet. If you think Warp Fire Throwers and Plague Claw Catapults are scary, first you're right, but second, just wait until the Warpstone Sniper Rifles and Warp Lightning Gatling Guns enter the field. And they almost assuredly will enter the field, because Warplock Jezzails and Rattling Guns were as iconic to the Skaven faction as any other war machine save the Doom Wheel. Which encompasses number 7 perfectly. Randomness. Spontaneity. Yeah. Number 7, Spontaneity. Part of the appeal that the Skaven had on the tabletop was the overabundance of random events that were possible when they took the field. Nearly every single war machine had its own custom mishap table. Essentially everything could blow itself up. Or, on the contrary, if the Horned Rat smiled upon you, everything could virtually disintegrate a dragon in one shot. It was a high-risk, high-reward situation, and it was fun. The Plague Furnace, the Doom Wheel, the Warp Lightning Cannon, all of them had their own custom ways to melt down or nuke an enemy. It made Skaven fun to play and fun to play against, and this will manifest in Total War Warhammer 2, at least in one way for sure. Number 8, the Doom Wheel randomly shoots its Warp Lightning Blasts, at random times, from random points on its model, at random units, whether those be your units or your enemies, which frankly is fucking awesome. As far as I can tell, you don't have any control over the Doom Wheel's missiles. I think it fires at whatever is closest to it, or whatever's like in front of it. So in that way you have a little bit of control, but at the same time it can fire from 3 sides, so yeah, I don't know. I think that this automatic random fire is completely unprecedented in Total War Warhammer, but please do correct me if I'm wrong. This of course is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's one less piece to micro in a faction that looks like it will require a lot of micro. On the other, it's not dependable like at all. But just like the Doom Wheel itself, the random time and targets the Warp Lightning hits is quintessentially Skaven. It's a bizarre contraption made of mishmashed parts that shouldn't work, but they do, to a devastating and terrifying effect on the battlefield. If only they could replicate this with a monster instead of a machine. Number 9, the Hellpit Abomination. Number 10, Queek Headtaker's Warp Forged armor stat of 120 is outstanding by any measure, equal to some of the most heavily armored lords in the game. Thorgrim, Belegar, Archaon come to mind to name a few. But in the context of the Skaven roster, possibly the most lightly armored faction in the Total War Warhammer series to date, he's virtually impenetrable. Not really, of course, because Queek's melee defense of 40 does leave something to be desired. Still, if you had an armor stat of 120 and a race of millions around you who had an armor stat of 15, not to mention you had an armor-piercing weapon damage of 420, you'd feel a little bold too. There's something about Queek I really like, something about how his character comes across. You can almost, like, dare I say, sympathize with him, maybe a little bit. I don't know, I like him. Number 11, the Bonebreaker. While it's fair to say the Skaven are joining the Dwarves in Norska as a faction without a real Cav presence, the Rat Ogre Bonebreaker mount is kinda sort of an exception to this. This unit was a pleasant surprise, frankly. The Bonebreaker is an extra strong, extra big Rat Ogre that walks on all fours because of its sheer muscle mass. If any of you are familiar with the Warhammer 40k Tau unit, the Krutox, that's kind of what a Bonebreaker's like, which is to say, basically a genetically engineered silverback gorilla on warp steroids, except with a Skaven warlord on its back. It's also a very promising sign for those who expected Thanquol and Bone Ripper. Number 12, nets. Everybody's favorite. The Skaven will have access to lots and lots of nets, although not the version that may come to mind. These are extremely toned down nets, nothing to worry about or game breaking or anything like that. It's no secret that in Total War Warhammer, hexes that prevent a unit from moving are very powerful and very tactical. The Nets of Amyntok, the Prey of Anathrema, Warzog's Little Voodoo Doll, and now the Hunter of Champions are all powerful abilities that can pin enemies in place for a set amount of time, which is why they're mostly reserved for powerful lords and heroes. Until the Skaven Gutter Runners arrive. Gutter Runners are a low-tier Skaven Missile Vanguard unit, which presumably means they won't cost a ton of gold. And each one comes with a net, although, like I said, a very toned down net. It only lasts for 9 seconds and has an extremely short range of 15 meters. Still, quantity has a quality all of its own, which the Skaven will surely prove because, like we've already seen, this is just one of many in their bag of tricks. And lastly, lucky number 13. The final reason to play Skaven in Total War Warhammer 2 is the backstabbing two-faced M. Night Shyamalan twist fit only for these guys. You should play the Skaven because they're bad. Nah, they're not really bad, guys. What I mean by this, of course, is not that they're underpowered or reverse broken, but they'll be a little bit trickier to use. The Skaven are not a war mammoth, forsaken, carnosaur savage orc rush tide that grinds it out and wins with sheer force. They're not an impenetrable line of armor, gunpowder, and discipline. They're not wizards with limitless magical power or ancient dragons and demons of inconceivable strength. Their armor will rip like wet paper. Their own artillery will blow holes straight through their own units. They will rout and then rout again in the face of monsters and terror. But this is the good thing, maybe the greatest thing of all. They're a finesse army that will require more cunning, more tactics, and more dirty tricks than any other. They'll require finding a rhythm or a balance between their hordes crashing in and their hordes routing out. Based on what I've seen, I think the Skaven will be good for this game because they'll provide a new style of play and a new challenge to the Total War community. They are the glass cannon to end all glass lightning cannons. But when that cannon fires on all cylinders, when every trap and trick and tool is used, when the carefully calculated plans of the Skaven come together, they will melt their enemies faster than a warp nuke. Or with a warp nuke. Alright guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. As always, this is Coda, thank you for listening, and take care.